Is the King James Version of the Bible the most accurate? I get emailed this question a lot. And whenever I have a video go viral and I mention a verse that's not quoted in the King's English, so to speak, someone will jump on and go, "KJV only, or you're going to hell." Now, I love the poetic language of the King James. And if you're an American Protestant, chances are good that you have a King James Bible somewhere in your house. It's the most printed book in the history of the world. You cannot deny the power and the influence that the King James Bible has had over the years. But does that mean it's the most accurate Bible translation? So let's go back in time, 420 years ago. 1603. King James VI of Scotland has become King James I of England. He's the first English king to assume the throne as a Protestant after Henry VIII's break from Rome 70 years prior. And it's been a wild time in English religious history. King James has assumed the throne from Elizabeth I, a Protestant, but Elizabeth was the one who had authorized the execution of James' Catholic mother, Mary, Queen of Scots. So you had Protestant versus Catholic issues going on. But not just that, in the Protestant church, you had different groups vying for power alongside the Anglicans, particularly the Puritans and the Calvinists. And in 1603, when James first succeeds Elizabeth, he immediately steps into a Protestant religious quagmire. He's greeted with the Millenary Petition, a document containing 1,000 signatures by Puritans demanding Anglican church reform. These guys don't think that the Anglican church has separated its processes from that of the Catholic faith far enough and want the new king to hammer down. But when meeting at the Hampton Court Conference in 1604, James rejects many of the Puritans' suggestions, except for one. To everyone's surprise, James agrees to a request that would impact the world even up to the present day, that of authorizing an official English translation of the Bible, which would come to be known as the 1611 King James Bible. Now, why did James I do that? Why a new Bible? Was it religious piety? No. It was politics. At that time, there were two primary versions of the English Bible in use in the Protestant faith. The first was the Bishop's Bible, which was the de facto standard Bible of the Church of England and had taken the place of King Henry VIII's Great Bible. This was the Bible that was read in churches. And second, there was the Geneva Bible, popular with the Puritans and Calvinists. And the Geneva Bible was trouble for the Anglican Church. The Geneva Bible contained annotations and margin notes that undermined the monarchy and the power of the bishops. So there was a big need to get things under control for the new king. You've got Catholic versus Protestant going on, and within the Protestant ranks, things are fracturing with different groups vying for power. So when a Puritan scholar suggested a new Bible translation at that 1604 conference, King James I was all up on it. It was shocking to everyone involved, but it was pretty clever political maneuvering. And he authorized a project that would take 7 years and 50 men, scholars, theologians, and translators, to translate a new English Bible from available, and that's important, primary manuscripts, the Old Testament from the Hebrew Masoretic text from between the 6th and 10th centuries, the New Testament from the Textus Receptus, which was translated from common scriptures between the 12th century and the 16th century, and the Apocrypha from the Greek Septuagint. And the translators were instructed to use the Bishop's Bible as a primary guide, which was a revision of Henry VIII's Great Bible, and that revision was based on Coverdale's Bible, which actually included most of William Tyndale's Bible translation from 1535. So that's why when you read the King James Bible, a lot of the wording flows as if you're reading a 15th, early 16th century document instead of a 17th century one, because the King James Version kept a lot of the wording from the Tyndale and Coverdale translations. I mean, even the original preface to the 1611 Bible says that the translators never set out to make a totally new, awesome, fantabulous, number one forever translation, but to make out of many good translations one principal standardized good one. And when it was released in 1611, and despite it being the most scholarly and faithful to the source texts that were available at the time version, it was filled with typographical errors and inconsistencies. There's the he and she versions, which had variations of Ruth 3:15. There's the Sinner's Bible, also known as the Wicked Bible, which was a print run of a bunch of Bibles featuring a serious misprint in Exodus 20:14, commanding people to commit adultery. But I mean, these are little things that are more typographical in origin. But despite its flaws at the time, the KJV's poetic flair within the more accessible English language in Britain and its mass production, the Bible was now available to the common person, and literacy was growing. And the effects were dramatic because for the first time, passages that were overlooked in churches were being read in the common home. But years later, a very unintended effect of this mass-read translation was the challenge to the divine right of royalty. And this accessible translation, over time, would be used to rein in absolute monarchical power, asserting that even kings are subject to God's law. And in 1881, the King James underwent revision with more than 30,000 amendments designed to modernize the text and fix the issues with the 1611 King James. And this culminated with the release of the 1885 KJV, which also no longer included the Apocrypha, as the British and Foreign Bible Society had decided in 1827 not to include the Apocrypha because the Apocrypha had fallen out of Protestant favor during the Puritan Revolution and made Bibles larger and more expensive to print. And in 1982, the New King James Version was introduced, including historical details and references to things like the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered in 1946 and 1947. But back to the question, is the English King James the most accurate word-for-word translation of the Bible? And the answer is no. There have been numerous manuscripts discovered over the last century using modern archaeological techniques and analysis that gives us a better and earlier picture of the scriptures. There's the Codex Sinaiticus, Alexandrinus, Vaticanus, and many, many, many more that show us variances, which is why newer Bibles note these discrepancies within the text. And also translators have advanced in their craft over the last 100 years. They work diligently to examine the scriptures, go deeper into the meaning of what's written than what was understood 200, 300, 400 years ago. Now, this video is not to hammer down on the King James, but it's to point out that we should never deify any texts. No written text is without its flaws. And it's crucial to understand that this critique of the King James Version, that applies to all Bibles. Deifying any version of the Bible, including the King James, is wrong. Jesus Christ, the Logos, is God's Word, timeless, eternal. Translations and language, however, do change. And it's also worth noting that it's straight up Eurocentric to believe that God prefers the English King James Version. There are billions of people in Asia, after all. So focusing in on the English translation as the only inspired translation is kind of gross, particularly when you consider that in the grand scheme of history, English is still pretty new. So look, the King James Version, it's valuable. It is beautiful. But claiming that the King James is the sole divinely inspired version of the Bible, that's straight up idolatry. And yeah, you can quote me on that. It is Jesus that is God's Word, the Logos, eternal and pre-existing. You could destroy every Bible in the world, but the Word, Jesus, would still exist. Now, I'm not saying we should blindly accept every Bible translation as God's ultimate word. With over 100 English translations and more than 2,000 in other languages, each translation presents its unique cultural context and linguistic issues. The aim of translators is not, nor has ever been, to find flawless, perfect translations, but rather ideal interpretations. We should celebrate the fact that people all over God's earth can connect with the Bible in their native languages, regardless of translation imperfections and issues. They can read of and hope to experience God's voice, His love, and His guidance in a language that they comprehend deeply. But should the King James be revered as the ultimate irrefutable translation? No way. The King James, like all versions of the Bible, is a means to understand and connect with God. But remember, it's the message, not the medium, that's truly consequential. It's not about the version you read, but your relationship with God and how His words shape your life. Like I said, I know a lot of people that pass Bible study but fail the love of Christ. The true potency and beauty of God's Word lies in its ability to transcend all of time, language, culture, to reach all who seek Him, regardless of the version they choose, be it the KJV, NIV, NRSV, HCSB, ESV, whatever, every other version. Concentrate on the message, the Logos, Jesus Christ. Let's stop creating idols out of paper and faux leather, and instead continue our pursuit of His truth, His love, His beauty, and release an awareness of the glory of the Lord across the earth as the waters cover the sea.